AfriKili family, Global P.A.C Nation, welcome to the Global P.A.C Show. So imagine you and your family members, your friends, your coworkers, close acquaintance, decide to talk about a political news or something that's, in the current events. And lo and behold, you both arrive at diametrically opposed conclusions on the exact same topic. And so you ask yourself, wait, am I the one who's crazy? What is going on? We're all seeing the same thing, or did we? But how is it that we're totally having diametrically opposed opinion? What is going on? Well, if you followed the show last week, you know that as we discussed before, that shouldn't actually be too surprising, right? Because, well, we were able to establish that the news, the headlines, the stories that we consume so much are actually not always a window into the world as they pretend to be, right? A window with facts. Rather, it is often stages that are carefully set to manipulate our political opinion. And so that helps explain why, on the very same set of facts, but based on how they're presented, based on the channel in which they're consumed, well, lead us to arrive to totally opposed, conclusions. Well, now, that being said, if that has been established, what do we do about it? So today's show is a continuation of what we started discussing last time. We talked about media manipulation. Well, today we will specifically talk about strategies. We'll talk about 7 specific strategies to help us combat and overcome this media propaganda and all the forces that seek to manipulate us across the media landscape, but also the political landscapes. So there you have it. Let's fasten our seatbelts, let's dive in, and let's get to work. Well, AfriKili family and Global P.A.C Nation, once again, welcome to the Global P.A.C Show. This is your host, your favorite host, I believe, right? Tony Mfumu Simba Kwambambangumbu. Such a pleasure for me to be once again in front of you on this July 22nd, 2025. I know we've really struggled to maintain a consistent schedule lately with everything that has been unfolding. Because I think the last time we did an English show was about a week ago. But nevertheless, always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for all of you who are supporting us. As a reminder, what is the Global P.A.C? Well, Global P.A.C, Global P.A.C. P.A.C stands for Pan-African Communities or Coalitions. So this show is really about building bridges, right? And building strong coalitions across global Pan-African communities. So people of African descent across the world. So we're talking about African American communities, Black communities in the United States. We're talking about Afro-descendants in the Caribbean, Latin America, European countries, Asia, across different African countries. So we have a true Pan-African bent. So we talk about stories, issues with our 3 pillars that are Pan-African history, Pan-African business, and Pan-African political action. So there you have it. But thanks for your support, as always. Well, today's topic, continuing on what we began last time when we started discussing this whole concept of, media manipulation. Because unfortunately in this world, in today's time, when we live in this constant 24 hours news cycle, we're bombarded by, news left and right, social media here and there. It becomes hard sometimes to stick by the truth because there's so much manipulation going on. And so we'll discuss that. We'll also discuss strategies, 7 strategies, hopefully to help us combat that. Because ultimately, the remote control to our political view really is on us, shouldn't be on anybody else. But before doing that, as has become a bit of a tradition, let's just do a quick roundup, going in different countries across the Global P.A.C, right, to see what's happening. Because I know many of us might be too busy sometimes to just keep an eye on the news in different Global P.A.C nations, but it's important, because on this platform, how are we to build strong coalitions? How are we to build strong bridges across different global PAC nations if we don't even know what's happening in different global PAC nations, right? So, and this will certainly not turn into a news channel. You have so many of those, but I'll just give you a quick, a few headlines here and there. All right. That being said, let's start with the African continent. Well, if you've followed a bit of the news, if not, well, you know the nation of Cameroon in West Africa. Well, there's 81 candidates who have submitted their candidacy to run for the presidential election in Cameroon that are set for October this year. But, as sensational as that may sound, the craziest news for me is that the president, Paul Biya, decides to run for election again. All right? This is just amazing. This is a guy that has been in power for over 40 years, the second longest serving president on the African continent. 40 years, folks, and he's 92 years old. What is going on here? I mean, can't we have other voices, younger people? Nothing wrong against folks that are up in age, but come on, man, 40 years in power and 92 years old, and he's going to run again? And he just reshuffled the leadership in the military, which just lets us know that the upcoming election in October, if he makes it up to October, in about 3 months, a little less than 3 months, well, those elections will certainly not be democratic, as is the case for somebody who's been in power for 40 years. That's just a shame. The second longest serving president in Africa, because the oldest serving president is Obiang Nguema in Guinea. All right, continuing with Africa. Well, the nation of Eswatini. Eswatini used to be called Swaziland. That's a nation that is totally engulfed, landlocked, surrounded by South Africa. If you look at South Africa on the southern tip of the African continent, so in the middle of South Africa, there's a nation called Eswatini. It used to be Swaziland. Well, there's a bit of an uproar in that country because people are saying they're not Donald Trump's dumping ground, because Donald Trump and his administration, have been using the nation of Eswatini as a destination to relocate or deport some of the undocumented immigrants. And so there was a plane that took about 5 undocumented immigrants in Eswatini. So there's a secret deal that was made between Trump and Eswatini. Now, in Eswatini, it's a tiny, tiny nation, about the size of New Jersey in Northeast United States, next to New York. It has a king, and that king has absolute power. So he negotiated something with the Trump administration to welcome undocumented immigrants. But as I say, it's causing a bit of an uproar. People are saying, we're not a dumping ground for the U.S. to just come and dump its illegal immigrants here. Amongst those nationals, there's a guy from Jamaica, apparently. And one of the arguments that the Trump administration said is that, those individuals are so dangerous that their home countries refused to take them back in. Well, Jamaica, on the other side, said, wait a second. Nobody contacted them about certain dangerous illegal immigrant or undocumented immigrants in the U.S., and they refused to take him in. So they're investigating that situation because Jamaica is saying nobody told them about that. And they're surprised to hear that there is a Jamaican migrant who has been sent to Eswatini. So they are investigating that situation. All right, let's move on to the European continents. Not much to talk about, except, sticking with Africa, let's stick with actually soccer. This is a bit of a light news. Nigeria beat South Africa to reach the final of the WAFCON. That's the Women African Cup of Nation. It's the soccer tournament. Soccer being the biggest sport in the world, as a matter of fact, called football. In the U.S. we call it soccer, but football. And this is significant because Nigeria, by beating South Africa, are set to reach their 10th final of this competition. So Nigeria is, on the women's side, is the winningest side in this competition, in women's, soccer, women's football in Africa. So congratulations to Nigeria for reaching the final of beating South Africa. For those of us who are based in Houston, Texas, who might be fans of the local football team called the Houston Dash, very happy because there is a player called Michelle Alozier who is based locally here in Houston, Texas. So we're very happy for her and her team for reaching the final. So congratulations for the Women's Super Eagle for reaching that final. All right, so now let's move on to the European continent. They're sticking with soccer. Well, actually before this show, I was watching a bit of the semifinal between the Lioness of England versus Italy, and England just won 2-1 on controversial fashion. The referee gave him a PK at the end, but anyways, we're not a sports show. The reason I'm bringing this up is because sports fans can be, dumb and idiotic and ridiculous sometimes. In the previous round, the quarterfinal, right? Well, England has this black player called Jess Carter, mixed player, who was playing left back. Well, in the previous game versus Sweden, she had one of her very poor games. And she was beat many times because she was playing against a player who was much faster than her. And England almost lost that game. England were down 2-0. They came back and then went to the PK, penalty shootout, and England won the game. Well, at the end of that game, that player, Jess Carter, totally became abused on social media, insulted and abused, and people just, hammering her. Racial abuse, which is just, unfortunate. And so as a result of that, the Lioness said, they will not take a knee before the game that just ended earlier before the show in the semifinal in support to Jess Carter, because they're saying it's just unacceptable that people will continue with all this racial abuse. And they're saying that, taking the knee has lost its value because people have taken the knee across different sports venues and sports events, but clearly it's not making a difference because you still have idiots continuing with their racist behavior. And this is just unfortunate. And here, the irony is that, the game, people are accusing Jess Carter of, using her blackness, for racial insults. Well, guess who is the player that helped England win that game? Well, they have this other black player. She's a 19-year-old player called Michelle Adjeman of Ghanaian descent, Ghana in West Africa. She's a tremendous forward striker. She came as a substitute in the last game, and she's the one who helped them win that game. And also today's game, the game that just ended versus Italy. Italy was up 1-0, and then Michelle Adjeman comes in at the end of the game as a striker, super sub, finishes and scores. This tremendous black player, she's a striker, phenomenal striker, 19 years old, but she has the world at her feet. But this is ironic, right? So this idiotic fans insulting Jess Carter for being black, as if being black has anything to do with the performance she had. But on the other side, you have this other black player that saved the nation. An interesting anecdote is that Michelle Adjeman, who scored, her Ghanaian name, Adjeman, apparently means the one who saves the nation. And literally, that's a name that is so apropos because she came as a super substitute and in both instances saved the nation of England because England was being eliminated. And thanks to this black player, Michelle Adjeman, England is moved on from both games. So to those fans, those idiotic people that are still clinging to racial divide as if the color of somebody's skin has some kind of inherent deficiency, they need to grow up and move on. Usually I would just, ignore this kind of stupid story, but it is something that we have to bring up. All right, let's move on to the United States of America. People of my generation who grew up watching the Bill Cosby show really felt this story because yesterday, unfortunately, the character who was playing the role of Theo on the Bill Cosby show, it's the actor, the singer called Malcolm Jamal Warner, unfortunately passed away in Costa Rica while he was on vacation with his family, swimming. A current took him away from the beach, and he ended up drowning. Very, very sad news. May his soul rest in peace. Like, folks, I personally really felt that story because some of the newer generation might not be familiar with the Cosby Show, but many of us grew up with, the Bill Cosby Show. Regardless of all the controversy and all the unfortunate negativity and behavior of Bill Cosby, ultimately. But that show, man, and Theo, playing Theo Huxtable, you had the Huxtable family, was such a prominent. And imagine, I didn't grow up in the United States, so imagine me not being raised in the United States of America as a young man, still watching that show. And that's also the power of, soft power, the power of entertainment, reaching global audiences. Like the Cosby Show was popular across the world. You went to Europe. We were watching the Cosby Show even before I got to Europe, when I was still in Africa as a young man. We were watching the Cosby Show. So that's a very, very sad news. May his soul rest in peace. And we hope that the person who tried saving him will make it, because as he was drowning, there were bystanders, somebody went in the water to try to rescue him, to pull him out. And apparently that person is in critical condition in Costa Rica. Prayers to the family of Malcolm Jamal Warner. May his soul rest in peace. That's a tough one, folks. That actually hit closer to home. It is unfortunate, but again, condolences to his family, and may his soul rest in peace. Another person who is iconic, I think, to Black culture and just Black people in general is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've said it on numerous times on this show, one of my personal heroes. Well, the Trump administration decided to release MLK files. MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. file. It's close to like 240,000 pages that are being released, declassified, and will be released to the public, even though Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s family is opposed to that. His son, Martin Luther King III, and his daughter, Bernice King, who are his only living kids, his two kids, spoke against that. Because there's a bit of a propaganda going on, an agenda going on here. Obviously, talking about releasing files, there's a whole talk about Jeffrey Epstein, right? The files that Donald Trump, with his lies, ran on during his presidential campaign, promised that he would release all the Jeffrey Epstein file because there's a cabal of pedophiles that were abusing kids, and there's elites, liberal elites, Democrats that were on that list, on Jeffrey Epstein's client list, and Trump promised that when he became president, he would release the file, and so you had a big chunk of his base that really clung to that. And now Trump refusing to release the file, calling some of his supporters stupid, and then turning the talk, saying that, actually the files were created by Barack Obama and the Democrat, which is just absolutely crazy. But, crazy and Trump apparently go hand in hand. But anyways, in this case here, so the release of this file, so people are talking about a distraction in the family, saying they didn't want it to be released now, but be that as it may, the file will be released, and we'll, dig into it, read, and obviously I won't read 240,000 pages. We'll see what kind of summaries we can get out of that. Hopefully we can get some new information on that. And that's a bit, that's also important based on the topic we'll discuss today about, media propaganda, how to overcome propaganda. And there's a reason why on the thumbnail for this show, you'll see that we've put Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Because that the government, the FBI, used all kind of tactics at the time to try to sully his reputation by feeding false stories and so on to the media, to shape and manipulate public opinion on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But ultimately, he overcame. He was assassinated, unfortunately, but history vindicated him. And we saw that how the government was attacking this black leader. And so here in this case, let's see what happens. But let's understand that Dr. MLK's family is against the release of those files right now. All right, let's continue with a quick roundup of the global P.A.C news, across the different nations. Interesting story here out of Trinidad and Tobago. The country has declared a state of emergency after they foiled a deadly gang plot. And so they've once again decreed a state of emergency. And so this was decreed by Trinidad and Tobago President, Her Excellency, Miss President Christine Kangaloo. And so in this case, because this is the second time in 8 months that this Caribbean nation of Trinidad and Tobago have placed the country under state emergency. And they're saying this is because of a spike in gruesome killings. There's an increase in gang activity. There are plots to assassinate top officials. So unfortunate, but let's see what will unfold there. And finally, finishing with the Caribbean for our roundup, the last story, we'll just make a quick stop in Jamaica. Jamaica is a big touristic destination, as many of us know. Beyond its reputation of being the country of Bob Marley, of reggae, and so on, Jamaica has beautiful beaches. It's a great touristic destination. And so, interestingly enough, the country has announced that since January early of this year, about 2.3 million visitors have visited the country, generating $2.4 billion in earnings. That is significant. And so the Minister of Tourism, called Edmund Bartlett, is the one who was issuing that and saying that ever since Hurricane Beryl went through the Caribbean, there were several disruptions in the region, but they're recovering from that. And so this is tremendous. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that just as tourists are coming, again, 2.3 million people since January, generating about $2.4 billion in earning. Well, the tourist minister is saying that all that money might actually be living with the tourist, because as these tourists are coming in, there is a big need of products and stuff that currently they might not have locally and that might need to be imported into Jamaica. And unfortunately, as any country, when you import a lot of goods, that means you obviously have to pay extra. It's instead of creating jobs locally. There's a saying in politics that says that when you import goods, you're in a way importing unemployment. Because imagine if a lot of those goods could be produced locally, you create jobs. Now, granted, there's things like economies of scales. There's, comparative advantage, whereas maybe some nations produce something at scale where you would not be able to produce that at scale. So when you look at the opportunity cost of you producing those, it might be too high and things of that nature. But nevertheless, here he's making a plea that as a country, they need to increase their capacity for production and so on, so that all this revenue that's generated from tourists would actually stay by being able to provide products that are manufactured and made locally. That's the plea he made, and that's a similar plea, I think, to all global P.A.C nation, is to really strengthen the financial muscle by increasing manufacturing capacity. Because in many of the global P.A.C nation, we have issues of unemployment and so on. We have young populations that just need opportunities, that want to work. And so it is up to leaders and so on to create the necessary environment that would incentivize businesses in the private sector to continue investing in those nations, investing at scale and creating businesses at scale and industry at scale, so that the young people can find employment and middle classes can be created. All right, folks. So there you have it. That is the end of our roundup. How long have we been here? 24 minutes already. Wow. Okay. All right. So let's go straight into the topic of our show today. All right. The show that we've titled 7 Strategies to Battle Against Media and Political Manipulation. This, I think, is a very important topic given the times in which we live. I mean, if you're here in the United States, for example, and you're just everything that's happening every day with Donald Trump and the sensationalism that they're seeking and, the decision that we're making. Well, depending on the news source, people just have totally diverging opinion on the same things, right? Some people will tell you Donald Trump is the best president ever. Some people will tell you he is the worst embarrassment of a president in the history of this nation. Just dissecting and analyzing some of the decisions that are made. And you will see that those point of views really line up with the source that people get the news from. In my own case, as you know, I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's this whole situation about, there's that peace deal that was signed on June 27 in Washington, D.C. between Rwanda and the DRC, where the DRC initially wanted to accuse Rwanda of attacking them, right, of invading the nation, but then they went to the U.S. to give its minerals in exchange for peace. But then they signed an agreement that nowhere said that Rwanda was aggressing the DRC, but rather they agreed to work hand in hand with Rwanda. And, for example, to reduce the threat of the FDLR. I'm not going to go back in details of that. I covered that in previous shows. But that whole story was covered. I mean, you have different Congolese, people that are getting news from the power circle, the president circle and so on. Because you have to understand the president, obviously, through propaganda, also campaigns, they're paying a lot of, people that are on social media and so, because in that nation, in that country, social media is very prominent at divulging, political news, TikTok, and so on. Well, you have totally different conclusions. Some people are so happy not seeing the reality, and the large majority are totally distraught with what happened. Well, a couple of days ago, there's another accord of principle that was agreed upon between the DRC government and the rebel group called the M23 rebel group. Again, even in my own family as I speak, with my close relatives, total different conclusion on that very same principle. You have people that, for some reason, based on how they're getting the news in social media and so on, are convinced that the country has actually won. When on the other side, there's nothing that is actually going in line with what the president was announcing. But nevertheless, what I want to talk about today is strategies. Not to say that one side is right necessarily and one side is wrong, but rather what I want to do is to talk about a roadmap. Because last time we talked about the fact that there are tactics that are used to manipulate people, right? Manipulate audiences. Those tactics are not a made-up thing. There's a science of propaganda. There's a science of public opinion manipulation, right? If you recall, very quickly, I presented to you a few books last time. There's this book, for example, Propaganda by Edward Bernays. Just go through this and you'll understand how propaganda is a thing, how public opinion is manipulated by the media and by some savvy operators, right? I also talked to you about this other book by Gustave Le Bon called The Crowd. This is the older version, and then there's a remade version of the same book called The Psychology of the Crowd. These are books that I highly recommend, again, if you're interested in seeing how propaganda works, but also how to defend yourself against propaganda, how to equip yourself. There's this book called Influence, right? Influence by Robert Cialdini. Now, this one I have not fully read. Even last week I told you I didn't finish this book yet. I'm still going through it. But another book, if you're interested in this sort of propaganda, manipulation, psychology behind convincing people and manipulating crowds. So there's a science. So don't underestimate it. So my hope today, by talking about this, by giving you the 7 strategies, is that by the end of this, hopefully, you will be equipped with tools that will allow you, as you decode this news, as you follow these news stories, to really, please put on your critical thinking hat and don't just follow blindly what is given to you, but understand how to decode and to see manipulation, overcome it, so that when you come to a conclusion, you are sure that you have come to that conclusion with a cold assessment of the facts, and that you have detected and decoded the strategies that were trying to manipulate you. And I think the more we can do that, the more we will be on the side of the truth. And we can confidently say that my version of this fact, my conclusion, based on the fact that I presented, is the truth one, and the others are maybe the manipulated one. So those strategies are very important. 7 strategies. I'm going to go through them fast, all right? So the first one is actually just to cultivate critical awareness. That's strategy number 1. Remember, we have 7 strategies, right? A roadmap that we're going to go through. So strategy number 1, cultivate critical awareness. What do I mean here? Just question everything. Don't just consume anything blindly, right? Don't absorb all the political information that you get on social media, on whatever news. Don't just absorb it blindly. Like, really question everything. So when something is presented to you, these are really basic questions, but you have to ask yourself if you want to make sure you're not being manipulated. Like, who's behind the message that you're receiving? All right. What is their agenda? Like, for example, I'm receiving TikTok videos from my relatives and my close ones, and I know very well that the person conveying that message are people that are paid, for example, by the government and others to convey a certain agenda. But the people that are transmitting it to me are totally oblivious to that fact and are just consuming it. So questioning yourself, who is behind that message? What is the agenda? All right. You have to understand that most news outlets are not, non-profit. They have an agenda. So if they present headlines that will make your blood just, boil, that will make you go, they've got you. That's what they want. So really, before you share all this stuff, just take a moment and think, all right? Remember that all media content is constructed. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily negative, could be a positive construction. You have to construct a news story the way you present it. So all news stories are constructed. All the content that you receive is constructed. Even this content that I'm presenting to you, obviously, is constructed somehow. But it is important to question everything. So strategy number 1, question everything. Ask yourself, what is missing? Who's behind this message? What is their agenda? Is there another angle to this story that I'm not seeing? If you develop that critical awareness, that will really help you detect all these content manipulations. So that's strategy number 1. Strategy number 2, look, diversify your information diet, all right? We need to break out of the bubble. Now, it's easier said than done, and time is of the essence. We don't have unlimited time, I understand, to get, news stories. When you see a headline, we don't have the time to go and start, reading or listening to 5, 10 different sources. We have busy lives. I get it. But it is important to diversify your information diet. So if today you decided to listen to a certain angle, force yourself to listen to other angles. You'll be surprised. I do that a lot in the United States for African news, for all my news sources. If there's a news source that's identified as, say, having a political leaning party, I'm going to get news from the other side as well, just to diversify, to see if there are angles that I'm missing. Because as you're actively seeking news from diverse sources with diverse viewpoints, it will also help you just hear different viewpoints. And so that will allow you to confirm or infirm your beliefs, right? Because we all suffer from a certain bias. It's called confirmation bias. All of us suffer from that. And naturally, all of us will tend to seek information that already confirm our belief. That's a natural tendency. And especially when it comes to social media, understand that you have algorithm behind what is recommended to you. So if you're on YouTube a lot or on TikTok a lot, on, I don't know, what's another one? On Facebook a lot, based on your history, based on your tendencies, you will get a lot of recommendation for news that line up with your tendencies. Your search history, understand there's an algorithm behind that. So what you're seeing is not necessarily the whole story. It is something that's crafted for you. Because this social media platform, what they want obviously is for you to spend a lot of time on those media platforms, right? So if they feed you the stuff that you like, so they help you feed on that confirmation bias, guess what? You're going to spend a lot of time on those platforms, and they will end up making a lot of money because they make money with your eyeballs. All right. So diversify your information diet, folks. It is important. So whether it's traditional media, in the US, you have the CNNs, the Fox, the MSNBCs, the whatever, Al Jazeera News, BBC America. And so diversify your news. If you're across the world, same thing. If in Europe, diversify your news diet. In Africa, the same. Asia, Latin America. It will behoove you. So strategy number 2, diversify your information diet. Strategy number 3, you need to master fact checking. All right. So fact checking, or what's called lateral reading. Lateral reading. So in other words, become your own investigator. If there's a news story that you feel like really matters to you, it's something that, touches your heart and you want to know more, become your own investigator. So really master lateral reading, right? So because there's so much disinformation, obviously, the thing with social media is that it's giving everybody a voice. We're no longer in the day of traditional media where we all sat in front of our televisions and we only had so many dedicated news channels. Today we have a smartphone, computer, it. Social media is all over the place. So everybody has an audience. And many people are seeking those subscribers, those likes, and so they're trying to build certain followings so they can get money behind that. And some people will push misinformation without even batting an eyelash if it allows them to grow their following. So be aware of that. So you need to master fact checking and lateral reading. If you're in the US, you have fact checking website like PolitiFact, you have factcheck.org, you have Snopes, and so on, that allow you to enter news stories or titles and so on, and it will help you fact check those. If you're reading something on the internet, on Google, there's something I like doing when it's called a lateral search. So I highlight something when I'm reading something on the internet. Once I highlight that, I right click on my mouse and I say search about that. And so it's going to open another tab. You have different tabs on your web browser. And so as it searches about it, I open that tab and then it allows me to see different sources. That is something that has proven to be very helpful, and I highly recommend that. So be your own investigator. That will help you decode and combat media and political manipulation. Strategy number 4, when you see a story, try to identify the 5 tactics of manipulation. So here I would point you back to the show we did last time about this topic. Remember, on that show, we talked about the different tactics of manipulation. Today, I'm giving you strategies to combat that. But to combat it, you need to know those tactics. And remember those 5 tactics? Where we talked about sensationalism, we talked about omission, framing, biased language, we talked about disinformation. So try to see if you can see that. So say there's a headline that says, Donald Trump is the first president in the history of the United States that combated inflation, whatever. I just made something up. You say, okay, or something more new, Jeffrey Epstein file. You see a headline that says, Donald Trump wants to release the Jeffrey Epstein files, but the Justice Department does not allow him to do that. So presenting a headline as if Donald Trump wants to obey his campaign promises, but it is, the Justice Department is preventing him to do it. All right, so let's go through sensationalism. You say, is there any sensationalism? So you try to detect, as you read that story, now you look for those 5 tactics of manipulation. Is there any sensationalism in this? So in other words, is there anything that's really trying hard to get a big emotional reaction from me? Is there some languages that's just over the top in this story? So you train yourself for that, and you start detecting that, because sensationalism is one of the tactics, right, to manipulate folks. You see, is there any omission in this story? In other words, what might be missing, okay? And who really would benefit from this version? So why are they omitting? So tactic number 2, you say, okay, is there any kind of framing in this story? In other words, how is this story presented? The story that I'm reading or the video that I'm watching? What's the framing? How is it presented, right? Like, how would a different frame change the point of view here? This is a critical question you ask yourself. Yeah, okay, you move on to another tactic. Is there any sign of any biased language in this article or this, video that I'm watching? Are the words being used like neutral words, or are they emotionally charged words? In other words, Donald Trump is adamant about wanting this. He is phenomenal. He is what's one word Donald Trump likes to use? Bigly. And then you start seeing, okay, what's the biased language here? And 5, is there disinformation anywhere? All right? Because when something is presented like too perfect, you have to be wary of that. So that might be part of some kind of coordinated campaign. So, okay, this sounds cumbersome, right? And obviously you will not do this for every news story that you read or what's not, but these are tactics that you can engage into to help yourself, detect this and then overcome. So this was part of identifying manipulation tactics. All right, strategy number 5. This is a big one, folks. Understand your own biases. Yes, newsflash, in case you did not know, you have biases too. Guess what? We all do. All of us have biases. I don't care who you are. Everybody has biases. This is a tough one because many of us might like to think that we're the most reasonable people in the world. We're the most intelligent. We're the most, protected from all these attacks. We can detect it. No, we all have biases. All of us. I hate to let you know if you didn't know, right? And those biases are simply shaped by our experiences. I mean, nobody's an island of himself. Every kid that comes into this world is an empty receptacle. Every human being. We're an empty receptacle, and we have minds that can be molded. All of us. Brains that can be molded. And so what we go through, our experiences, our surroundings, our community, our culture, all of that ends up molding our viewpoint. And all those will create filters or lenses through which we filter everything around us. It is part of being human. So having biases is not necessarily wrong. It means we're just human beings. But it also means that we have to be cognizant of that as we try to arrive to conclusion on facts and news stories that we follow. Okay? So yeah, I know it takes a lot of, I would say, intellectual humility to admit that our brains aren't perfect. Might be influenced, but it's the reality of it, folks. The more you're critical about that, the more you help protect yourself against manipulation tactics. All right, let's move on. The 6th strategy to help you combat or battle this media and political manipulation. Strategy number 6, focus on substance over style. Okay? Seek for depth. Is there any depth in what you're being presented? Is it all about just the great graphics and music and so on? Or is it an in-depth conversation? Okay. Also, what proof is being provided with what you're reading? All right. Are there any credible sources? So you really need to focus on substance over style. It might look fantastic. The graphics might be great, but does the argument make sense? The camera must be the best quality, might be the best quality camera, but is there data for what's being talked about? Is it contextualized? Does the argument again make sense? If you're presenting polls, remember, polls can be tricky. What are the questions being asked on those polls? All right? Because, information that is trustworthy might not always be the sexiest information, might not always be the most exciting information. It might even be complex sometimes. It might not always be the most thrilling information, but it's closer to the truth. All right. So let's seek depth. So let's focus on substance over style. Our last strategy number 7, be aware of the influence of the algorithms. Be aware of that. As I was saying before, your social media feeds and your results are curated by algorithms that are designed to keep you hooked. So be aware of the influence of algorithm. All right. Your job is not to provide you with balanced information with all viewpoints. The job of the algorithm, again, is to keep you hooked on that platform. So that has a big risk of creating what we call echo chambers. You know what an echo chamber is? Essentially, you speak, you think you're getting other voices that are coming to you, but it's your own voice that's just bouncing back and coming back. It's an echo chamber. Algorithms are good at creating echo chambers. So in other words, bringing you back viewpoints that are just confirming your confirmation bias. Let's be aware of that. All right. And because you cannot fully control those algorithms, ways to lessen the grip of that, do what I was saying before. So, seek diverse sources, but also be skeptical of the recommended content. When you see something that's recommended, don't necessarily click on it. Maybe do your own research on something else. All right. Sometimes use private browsing so that you are, hidden. So your history is hidden and things of that nature. All right. All right, folks. So those are the 7 strategies that I think if we practice them over time, it will help us decode, battle the media and all this political manipulation. So just a quick recap. Strategy number 1, cultivate critical awareness. Strategy number 2, diversify your information diet. Strategy number 3, master fact-checking and lateral reading. Strategy number 4, identify the specific manipulation tactic, those 5 manipulation tactics. Strategy number 5, understand your own biases. Have a bit of humility and understand your own biases. Strategy number 6, focus on substance over style. And strategy number 7, be aware of the influence of algorithms. All right. So as we keep an eye on these strategies and we try to implement it, well, then the journey to a better perception closer to the truth will be an ongoing one. All right. So why not start today? This is very easy. All right. So this is my call to action to you guys. If it's something you've never done, you don't even, spend a moment or you just read and then you move on and you come to a conclusion. Okay. You might be busy, but take a news that you really think is important or something that's important to you. All right. And try to put it through these lenses and then and try to break it down using these ideas. All right. So ask yourself, like, what are the frames that are being used? Or what sensationalism do you see? What might be omitted? All the framing and stuff like that. All right. All right. Why don't you share your comments on this? Let me know what you think. And then we'll go from there. All right. So we have covered quite a lot today, ladies and gentlemen. We've talked about, on the previous show, we had talked about the extent of media manipulation. Today, I try to give you a roadmap and a guide to overcome that. All right. But really, I think the overarching point I wanted to make in today's show is to let you know that, let's not be defeatist. Ultimately, the power is really ours. The power is yours. The power is yours. And you have that power in your ability to question things. The more you question things, the more you regain that power. All right. You have the power in your ability to seek diverse viewpoint. Diversifying your diet allows you to regain that power. You have the power in your ability to dissect different stories. You have that power in your ability to understand your own biases. All right. So it's all about going from a passive intake to an active intake of news stories and so on and so forth. The power is really yours. All right. So when I'm very big on that, on being able to form fair opinions. All right. So, and this is not something like fair opinion is not like some kind of mythical, unbiased source. No. Like arriving to a fair opinion, it's about the process. The process I tried laying down, and this is the second video I've talked about it. So my goal is really not to make you cynical about anything, right? But rather, I want us to be empowered so that we can engage thoughtfully and independently. All right. So the remote control to the political view is in our hands. Nobody else. We have that power. So let's use it wisely. And that is also very critical for our community and our mission in the Global P.A.C. So that our mission to build bridges and coalitions can be based on truth, not half truth, not manipulations, but on real truth. Thank you very much. Before concluding, let me do what has become our tradition. So I'm going to play, let's put up a quote as has become the tradition. And today the quote I'm going to use, since we talked about Dr. MLK, his file being released and so on, the quote for Dr. MLK Jr. say, may I stress the need for courageous, intelligent, and dedicated leadership. Leaders of sound integrity, leaders not in love with publicity, but in love with justice. Leaders not in love with money, but in love with humanity. Leaders who can subject their particular egos to the greatness of the cause. That's the kind of leadership we need in the Black community, in the global Pan-African community. But that's the kind of leadership we need in the world, generally speaking. The kind of leadership we need. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, thank you very much for your support. Before concluding, let me remind you, there's 2 things you can do to help us, folks. 2 things, very easily. First, please subscribe. Only takes a second. It allows you to become part of this community. It allows you to help the community grow. Because without you, we cannot do it. I need your help. So thank you for clicking on that subscribe button now to help this platform grow and help you become part of this community. Second thing you can do, share. Share our contents in your network. If you think that there are people that might benefit from what we're talking about, share it. All right. It's very, very simple. It doesn't cost you anything. Thank you very much for that. All right. Until next time, I am Tony Kwamba Mangumbu Fumusimba. There's something I wanted to say. Snap. Am I getting old or something? Anyways. I hate ending this thing. I know there's something I wanted to announce. Okay, well, apologies about that. That being said, until next time, remember, we are beautiful people. We are a strong people. We are very special people. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. More importantly, we are the Global P.A.C. So until next time, peace be with you. Asante sana, which means thank you very much in Swahili. And remember, we are the Global P.A.C. Let's get to work. Thank you very much.